Chapter 1. How It All Began. I never thought I'd be the one writing a story like this. You hear about betrayals, you think that's something that happens to other people. Not you. But here I am, typing this, trying to make sense of it all. I met Elle during her freshman year in college. We lived 2 towns apart, ended up in the same dorm building, and just clicked. I still remember the first time she laughed at one of my dumb jokes. It felt like lightning hit my chest. Every time we went home, she'd ride with me. It was just a 20-minute detour, but with her in the passenger seat, I didn't mind one bit. Over time, it wasn't just about convenience, it became our thing. Music on low, windows down, just talking about everything and nothing. We made it official pretty quickly. My family adored her. My dad? He went out of his way to make her feel welcome, maybe a little too far now that I look back. But back then, I thought he was just trying to be a good father. I was proud to have someone like her, and proud to show her off to the people who mattered. After I graduated, I landed a job back home. She still had a year left, but we made it work. I'd visit her, she'd come back during breaks, and somehow we made the distance feel short. When she finally graduated, she moved in with me. Both of us had great jobs, we were building a life step by step. After 3 years of living together, I proposed. She said yes. It felt like everything had fallen perfectly into place. We started planning the wedding, looking at venues, picking songs. We even talked about kids. I really believed, that this was it. But now I look back and I see things I should have noticed. Like how my dad would call her directly. He'd say they were planning family parties or surprises for mom. I didn't think much of it. Why would I? He was my father. One day, Elle was in the shower and her phone started ringing. It was my dad. I answered, thinking maybe something had happened. He sounded surprised, almost disappointed to hear my voice. He said he just wanted to talk about mom's birthday. Seemed innocent. But his tone stuck with me. Still, I brushed it off. Because when you love someone, when you trust 2 people with your whole heart, your brain works overtime to justify the cracks. And maybe that's why I didn't see what was coming. I wish I had. Because nothing could have prepared me for what I walked into on that Thursday afternoon. Chapter 2. The Day That Broke Me. It started like any other Thursday. Elle had the day off, so she made breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee just the way I liked it. She kissed me on the cheek, smiled, and told me to have a great day. I kissed her back and headed to work like nothing was wrong. Like my world wasn't just hours away from detonating. Around mid-morning, I realized I'd forgotten some paperwork I needed for a 3 p.m. meeting. No big deal. I figured I'd just swing home at lunch and grab it. Elle kept texting me throughout the day, just the usual. What do you want for dinner? I did laundry, do you want me to hang up your shirts? Nothing out of the ordinary. She sounded like the woman I'd spent nearly a decade building my life with. Nothing about her messages hinted that she was betraying me in the most unthinkable way. I didn't even text her I was coming home. It was just a quick stop, 5 minutes tops. I pulled into our parking lot and noticed a car that looked a lot like my dad's. But again, no red flags. I thought maybe he stopped by to drop something off or say hi. My brain didn't even go there. I opened the door to our apartment. And everything inside me stopped. There was a trail of clothes. Men's and women's. Leading from the living room to our bedroom. My bedroom. Our bedroom. I stood there, frozen. Like a statue. My heart was thundering in my chest, but my limbs wouldn't move. Then I heard it. Soft, rhythmic moans coming from behind the door. You always imagine how you'd react in a moment like that. Maybe you'd kick the door down, maybe scream, maybe cry. But me? I just stood there. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Eventually, something inside me snapped back into gear. I pulled out my phone and started recording. I picked up their clothes from the floor, his pants, her bra, and threw them into the hallway. I wanted the world to see what they were. Who they were. I approached the bedroom and stood in the doorway, camera still rolling. The door was cracked. I could hear them breathing, laughing even. I turned on the lights. And what I saw, I was in my bed. With my father. They both screamed and jumped when the light came on. The moment they realized it was me standing there, the horror in their eyes, it felt like watching a car crash in slow motion. My father scrambled for a towel. Elle just pulled the sheets up to cover herself. They looked like kids caught doing something forbidden. Except this wasn't childish. This was sick. My dad lunged at me trying to grab the phone. I warned him not to come closer. He didn't listen. So I hit him. I don't even remember making a fist. I just remember the crack of his jaw and the sound of his head bouncing off the doorframe as he dropped like dead weight to the floor. Elle screamed. But I didn't look at her with sadness. I looked at her like she was a stranger. Amazing, I said. You've got all this energy for my father but nothing to say to your fiancée? She didn't answer. Just stared, tears forming in her eyes like she was the victim. I looked at both of them, my father slowly coming to L wrapped in betrayal and linen, and said coldly, "I just came to grab something for work. If either of you are here when I get back, I'll send this video to everyone you know." I turned and walked out. But I didn't cry. Not yet. I just drove. And as I drove, my phone buzzed. A call from my boss. I wiped the blood off my knuckles and answered. I wasn't ready to face what came next. Chapter 3: The Fallout begins. I don't even remember the drive back to work. My hands were shaking. My mouth was dry. I must have gone through 10 red lights without noticing. I felt like I wasn't even in my body anymore. Like my soul was hovering somewhere above me, watching this horror unfold through someone else's eyes. When I got to the office, my boss immediately noticed something was off. She asked if I was okay, but I just nodded and handed her the paperwork like I wasn't carrying a live grenade inside my chest. She spotted the blood on my collar and stepped forward, alarmed. "You're bleeding," she said. I looked down and said, "It's not mine." Her face twisted with confusion. I pulled out my phone, opened the video, and handed it to her without saying a word. She watched. Her eyes widened. Her mouth dropped open. She looked at me like she had just witnessed a murder. And in a way she had, just not a physical one. When it ended, she didn't say anything. She just sat back stunned. Then she whispered, "Oh my God, that was your fiancé? And your dad?" I nodded. She offered to let me go home, even suggested I take some time off. But I told her I couldn't. I needed something to anchor me. Something normal. If I went home, I'd be alone with the silence. And I was terrified of what that silence might say to me. I made it through the meeting with a forced smile and numb hands. Afterward, she pulled me aside again and said, "I don't know how you just did that." I looked at her and said, "I don't either." Then I left. The moment I stepped back into the apartment, they were gone. Not a trace. The clothes I'd thrown into the hallway were missing. The bed was still rumpled from their betrayal, but the silence was complete now. Almost like the walls were trying to pretend nothing had happened. I sat down on the edge of the couch and just stared into space. This place, our home, it wasn't mine anymore. It was infected. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't sleep in that bed. Couldn't walk that hallway without seeing the trail of their clothes. I had to burn it all down. Not with fire, but with absence. I had to disappear from the life we'd built before it swallowed me whole. The next day, I texted Elle's parents. I told them I was calling off the engagement. I told them their daughter cheated on me. I didn't mention with whom. I thanked them for their kindness over the years, for making me feel like I was part of their family. I asked them to come pick up her things. They never replied. I boxed up everything that reminded me of her clothes, her books, even the toothbrush she left in the bathroom. I left the boxes by the door, like an eviction notice I couldn't legally enforce. Then came the hardest part. I called my mother. Or I tried to. No answer. 12 tries later, still nothing. So I drove to her house, my mind racing the entire way. How do you tell your mother her husband is sleeping with your fiancé? I didn't get the chance. She came outside the second I pulled into the driveway, furious, screaming at me. "How dare you hit your father?" she shouted. "He was only trying to stop you from fighting with Elle. You're violent. She's scared of you." She called me an abuser. Said I had nerve showing my face. Said she hoped Elle never forgave me. And in that moment, something in me broke all over again. I snapped. And what I said next shattered everything between us. Chapter 4: My own mother turned against me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse. I didn't even cry. I just stood there, stunned, as my own mother spat words at me like venom, defending the two people who had ripped my life apart. She believed them. She believed him. I stared at the woman who raised me, who once kissed scraped knees and read me bedtime stories, and all I saw was a stranger. A stranger standing on the front porch of the house I grew up in, yelling that I was the one who broke everything. And then I snapped. "Really, Mom?" I said. "Because your husband is sleeping with my fiancé. That's why I hit him. Not because of some argument. Not because I lost control. Because I walked into my home, and found them in my bed." Her face just crumbled. For a second she didn't believe me. She shook her head, confused, trying to piece together some other explanation. So I pulled out my phone and sent her the video. No words. Just a cold silence as she opened the clip. She watched it, eyes wide, jaw clenched. When I saw her thumb tremble as she paused the video, I knew she'd seen enough. I turned to leave. "You don't get to talk to me like that and still be my mother," I said. "You weren't there when I needed you most." You believed them over me. You stood by while I drowned. She called after me. Said my name. Said wait. But I didn't turn around. I drove off and didn't look back until I was home again alone. The pain came in waves: rage, disbelief, grief. And beneath it all, a quiet shame that I still loved her even after what she said. That night I packed more. Everything that reminded me of my parents went into boxes. Photos. Gifts. Childhood mementos. Even the damn throw blanket Mom gave us for the couch. It all went into storage. Out of sight. I texted Elle's parents again. Still no answer. So I left the boxes by the front door and hoped they'd come soon. Because if she walked through that door again, I didn't trust myself not to explode. The next few days passed in a fog. I went to work, pretended everything was normal. Smiled through meetings. Nodded through conversations I didn't hear. Nobody at work knew the truth except my boss, and even she had stopped asking. I think she knew better than to press. Eventually, I knew I couldn't stay there anymore. Not in that apartment. Not in that bed. I started looking for places, and a friend of mine, a real estate agent, sent me a listing for an old cabin on the outskirts of town. It was quiet, isolated, surrounded by trees. It looked like peace. It looked like escape. I moved out 2 days later. And just as I was settling into the silence, I got the one phone call I never expected. From my mother. She said she had something I needed to know. Something that couldn't wait. I met her at a diner near her place, Neutral Ground. She was already there, waiting, holding a cup of untouched coffee. Her eyes were red, her face drawn. She didn't look like the woman who'd screamed at me in the driveway. She looked like someone who had lost everything. She apologized, over and over, for the things she'd said, for believing my father. She said she never thought something so disgusting could be true. That it was easier to believe the lie. I listened. I didn't forgive her. But I listened. And then, as I stood to leave, she reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "There's something else," she said quietly. "Elle is pregnant." She looked at me, eyes full of guilt and dread. "She doesn't know if it's yours, or your father's." Chapter 5. Starting over in silence. I left the diner with her words echoing in my ears. Pregnant. Doesn't know if it's mine, or his. You'd think something like that would trigger rage or panic. But all I felt was nothing. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even ask questions. I just drove. And somewhere on that long, winding road back to my cabin, I pulled over, rolled down the windows, and let the cold wind rush through the car. For a moment it felt like I could breathe again. But it didn't last. That night, I sat on my back deck and stared into the woods, a bottle of cheap whiskey in my hand, silence pressing against me like a second skin. There was no music, no phones buzzing, no messages, just the whisper of trees swaying in the dark. No one knew where I lived now. Not Elle. Not my parents. Not even most of my friends. I had vanished. I didn't want company. I didn't want comfort. I wanted space. Space to feel nothing and everything all at once. I started therapy that week. I told her the bare bones at first: fiancé, betrayal, father, fallout. She didn't flinch. Just nodded and asked me what I needed. I didn't have an answer. The second session went deeper. I told her about my family, the kind of home I thought I grew up in. I told her how proud I used to be of that life. And how quickly it shattered. She asked me why I cut my mom off. I told her it wasn't just the betrayal, it was the things she said when I was at my lowest. The way she made me feel like I was the villain in my own story. I told her there are things a mother can't unsay. I kept busy. I worked long hours. I sanded floors. I repainted walls. I fixed cabinets with hinges that squeaked like ghosts. I poured my rage into physical things, things I could measure, touch, destroy, rebuild. And slowly, the cabin started to feel like mine. It wasn't much. The place had been refurbished decades ago, and even that felt generous. But I made it mine. I made it me. I reached out to my old friends, slowly, cautiously. Most didn't know the full story. I didn't tell them everything. Just enough. Enough to stop the questions and let the healing start. My boss still checked in now and then. She'd ask how I was holding up. I'd smile and lie. I'm fine. But truthfully, I wasn't. I was getting through the days, not living them. I was moving, but I wasn't healing. I was coping. And I guess that counts for something. Then last night, I got a text. Unknown number. 3 words. We need to talk. No name. No follow-up. But I knew. Elle had found me. Chapter 6. The answer I never wanted. I stared at the text for a long time. We need to talk. No name. No number I recognized. But I didn't need confirmation. Some silences speak louder than words. and some messages don't need a signature. I didn't respond. I set the phone down, walked outside, and stood on my porch, breathing in the cold morning air. The forest around me was still asleep, quiet and untouched. The way I wished I could be. But the world doesn't wait for healing. By afternoon, another message came. This one with a name. It's L. I'm sorry for how everything happened. I need to tell you something. In person. I nearly threw the phone against the wall. I wanted to scream. Now she wanted to talk? Now, after all the pieces had already shattered? Still, part of me needed to know. Not for closure, I knew better than to expect that. But because some answers are heavy enough that the not knowing will haunt you louder than the truth ever could. So I agreed. We met at a park halfway between my new place and the town we used to call home. Neutral ground. Empty benches. Quiet trees. Too much sky. She looked different. Tired. Thinner. Her eyes were swollen like she hadn't slept in days. She didn't say a word at first. Just sat beside me on the bench, clutching her coat. After a while, she looked at me and said, I know you probably don't care, but I'm sorry. I didn't say anything. I didn't mean for it to happen, she continued. I was confused. Lost. Your dad, he knew what to say. He made me feel seen. That's when I finally spoke. And I didn't? She flinched like I'd slapped her. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said. But I need to tell you something. Something important. My chest tightened. She took a deep breath. I'm keeping the baby. The world around us stood still. I don't know if it's yours, or his, she said, voice trembling. I got the dates mixed up. But I'm not asking anything from you. I just thought you deserved to know. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time I didn't see the woman I once loved. I saw a stranger. A stranger carrying a piece of my past and possibly a part of my blood. Or his. There was no answer that would fix it. No DNA test that would bring me peace. Because the damage wasn't in the biology. It was in the betrayal. I stood up slowly. You're right, I said. I deserve to know. But I also deserve peace. And that's something you'll never be able to give me. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. So what happens now? I looked out at the trees, tall, steady, unmoving. I keep going, I said. You live with what you did. And with that I turned and walked away. She didn't follow. And I didn't look back.